Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of our Tactical Breakdown series, the show in which we look at the players that have been linked to Arsenal in a statistical and analytical way with the help of some expertise to help break them down. Of course, you join us on deadline day. I'll be very honest, if you'd have asked me 2 days ago who I would be doing a tactical breakdown of on deadline day, I wouldn't have been saying Jorginho. But here we are talking about Jorginho on deadline day. I'm very happy, though, to be joined by a former colleague and good friend, Daniel Childs. How you doing, mate? You good? You well?
Yeah, doing well. I mean, a bit like Arsenal, Chelsea, busy time on transfer deadline day, particularly for the expectations of a January window. This has been quite mental in terms of the number of signings. So, yeah, it's been a bit wild, and I think at this point, like us all, I think I'm ready for the transfer window to end.
Yeah. You and me both, mate. You and me both. Of course, Chelsea themselves have been involved in a lot of Arsenal-related activity. Mahalo Mudryk was the big story at the beginning of the window. Moises Caicedo, of course, was kind of the latter stage, and you're still very much involved in trying to get a deal for Enzo Fernandez, of course, across the line, and potentially Marcel Sabitzer is being talked about as well. In terms of kind of how you look at Chelsea, and we'll get onto Jorginho shortly, but just because while you're here and to give people kind of a bit of an insight from an Arsenal perspective, it's pretty mad looking at Chelsea and how much has been spent recently. How do you take it in as a Chelsea fan and content creator of the money that's involved in Chelsea at the moment?
At time, it has been galling and kind of a little bit chaotic in terms of understanding, just your expectations more than anything. Like you think, can all these deals get done? And the amount of times the years I've been doing Chelsea videos and covering the club, it has been quite wild how many have been done. But when I actually take a broader view of particularly this window, and I look at the targets, I look at what this squad needs, and also what I think the plan is from the new ownership, I think it makes more sense. I think there's been a lot of people who've just kind of thrown their hands up and gone, well, what is the plan? But when you actually look at the profile of these players, clearly going in a younger direction. I mean, Chelsea now, I believe, have a full 11 of players contracted to 2030, all under the age of 25. And that is since last summer. So it's quite obvious what the plan is. That doesn't mean it's a foolproof plan. That doesn't mean the plan is going to go perfectly. But I think there is some thinking behind this, and I think it has been kind of portrayed from outside that Todd Bowley is just walking around. He's taking jets to everywhere just to sign whoever he feels he gets a fancy for a player and just signs them. And obviously, there are more people involved in that process. But we will see how it all works out.
Yeah, we will. And of course, where Chelsea end up this season is going to be massive regarding, of course, what might happen in the summer and the potential for the following seasons and where this project goes. But a player that won't be part of that project is Jorginho, who is on the verge of being announced at this point. Of course, if you're listening to this a little bit later, he may have already been announced by this point. So effectively, we can talk about Jorginho as if he is an Arsenal player at the moment. To give you guys a bit of an outset on what the plan is for today's show, we're going to be kind of looking into what he was like at Chelsea, style of play positionally as well, and make some statistical comparisons and how he might fit into Arsenal, and then ultimately come to a verdict on is he worth the £12 million Arsenal are paying for him in the end. So we'll kick off with, of course, that career as we talk about, signed from Napoli back in 2018-19 when he arrived. Yeah. How has he fared at Chelsea in that time?
Yeah, the career of Jorginho at Chelsea is a really interesting one to delve into. He has been at times a very divisive figure, a controversial figure, someone that has sparked a lot of debate, particularly online between Chelsea supporters. And, it's weird
like
today.
I tweeted
yeah, I mean, there probably is similarities between those two players. And, in the end, maybe there's more positives there than negatives, and he kind of won over, like Xhaka, I assume now has won over a lot more Arsenal fans than not compared to a few years ago. But I think with Jorginho, it's weird that it's all ended so abruptly, because I think that there's more to say about Jorginho's legacy. But obviously, that's not for an Arsenal stream. That's for my own content that Chelsea fans have been merged in with. But in the case of his career, he had a very challenging first year because he came in under Maurizio Sarri. I mean, that was the year when he could have gone to Manchester City. I think a lot of people expected him to. But Sarri coming to Chelsea effectively changed that. And then he comes in and kind of he starts well, but then when things start going wrong for Sarri, Jorginho is kind of leveled with that, and I think he dealt with a lot of harsh abuse, unfair abuse, in that first season. And I think by the time Sarri left, there was kind of a feeling that, oh, is he just going to move on because he's kind of Sarri's player? But then he stays around for Lampard. Lampard uses him for majority of his first season, but then eventually gets phased out. And until Thomas Tuchel arrives, I think there was an expectation that Jorginho wasn't going to be around for much longer at Chelsea. He kind of served his purpose mainly under Maurizio Sarri, and also the fact that, Chelsea maybe were looking to go in a more progressive and more so energetic way in central midfield. And Jorginho, unfortunately, was coming to represent a lot of our bad traits in central midfield, a lack of balance. That I'm sure this is stuff we will get to when we talk about his style of play. Is the flaws within Jorginho's game were there in 2018. They're still here and are probably more prominent in 2023. They've always been there and they haven't gone away. But you get into then his best run as a Chelsea player. And if you're an Arsenal fan, this is what you're probably looking at as kind of hope, because when Thomas Tuchel comes in, he makes Chelsea a lot more defensively solid. He moves Jorginho back into a very protected role in the heart of our double six, with N'Golo Kante mainly when we're looking at that Champions League winning run. And Jorginho gets the heights of performance in the Champions League that I don't think many Chelsea fans expected him to reach. And he's a massive part of that success. That same summer, he goes on to win the Euros of Italy, and is stopped by the autumn of 2021 is very high. I have to say, since then, there has been a decline in terms of, and I think this chart maybe shows that in terms of his value reaching its peak in 2021, which is when I personally felt Chelsea should have sold him in that summer after the Champions League win, to now when you will get good performances from Jorginho, you will get professional performances. He's a very durable player. He is a player that unfortunately comes to represent a lot of the social media stuff we see, in the sense that always extremes with Jorginho. He's either the best midfielder Chelsea have ever had, which is not true, or the worst midfielder Chelsea have or ever had, which of course is not true either. I think there is a balance with Jorginho to be had. And I think it's for what, when we get to the end of this, is what Arsenal are looking to get out of Jorginho. Then I think if you're looking to get someone who's going to be a very experienced member of your dressing room to offer you a short-term solution, isn't going to be someone you're going to build your midfield around, then maybe that's what Jorginho will provide. But he's as I say, I mean, I've wrote so many articles and made so many videos about Jorginho in his Chelsea career, because he's such an interesting figure to look around in terms of what Chelsea fans have thought about him. I think if you'd speak to 10 Chelsea fans, you may get 10 different responses. But I feel that in the end, I think most Chelsea fans today mainly will reflect on his influence in the Champions League win and think good guy, good character, and wish him the best.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's the reason why I got you on, because I thought you would be the most balanced of people I could speak to on this, to be honest. So, it's obviously not the signing that I don't think necessarily people wanted, especially when we've been linked to Moises Caicedo, a player that obviously is doing really well in the Premier League, 21 years of age, on the up. Whereas you look at Jorginho, he's a player that is coming to the end. And obviously there's also this dynamic between Arsenal and Chelsea, that Arsenal have taken on a lot of Chelsea players in the past, although it's been 2.5 years since that Willian deal being the last one. But then you've got, by the way, that's an impressive drink you've got there. That was ridiculous.
Sorry, yeah, liters of water.
Liters of water there, ridiculous. I thought my
water
stay
refreshed.
Was massive, but
yeah, you got to stay refreshed watching Chelsea and trying to speak about Chelsea this season. That's how you survive, Tom.
Indeed, no, you need to. Hydration is going to be key.
I have to admit that is water, by the way. That isn't any other substance that looks like water.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. But no, as I say, Willian was the last one 2.5 years ago. We've had players, of course, like David Luiz, Ben Ayoun on loan, of course, another one, Petr Cech, and they've never really worked out. And this leads a lot of Arsenal fans to have a bit of a stereotype and a stigma about that there's no chance any player that moves from Chelsea in the latter stage of their career can succeed. Now, for me, he doesn't need to he's not coming in like Willian did when he signed to start games. He's not coming in like Petr Cech did to start games. He's not coming in like David Luiz did to start games. He's coming in to be an option that's better than Mohamed El Neni behind Thomas Partey. That's what he's coming in at. And I think that's maybe what people need to get their heads around. And he is better than Mohamed El Neni. There isn't much argument at all to suggest that's not the case. You look at the all of the statistics, all of the evidence. If you had a choice playing against, Thomas Partey is not available, Arsenal are playing City the next day, who would you rather have playing in the DM position? Is it El Neni or is it Jorginho? I think you're going to struggle to see a genuine argument for the latter. It's but it's people still need convincing in terms of his style of play, and we'll talk about him positionally as well. He is a player, obviously, that passing wise, very safe, and you can usually rely on him to play a decent pass. He can be progressive, and we'll look at some of his stats in a bit. Quite good he's quite quick in terms of how he's with the ball at his feet. Not so quick in terms of across the ground, but certainly I've seen plenty of clips of him, taking on players in small spaces, working the small spaces really, really well. Granit Xhaka is a way of kind of winning fouls in dangerous positions in his own half. I see Jorginho does that as well. So what do you make of him stylistically as a number 6? And feel free, obviously, to make that comparison to what you've seen of Partey as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Jorginho, if you're looking at him to be a serious competition or someone that is going to be in the mold of Thomas Partey, you're looking in the wrong place. This is not the player that is going to be protecting your defense in kind of the old-fashioned way of someone who's going to really physically dominate the opposition, someone who's going to cover a lot of ground at speed. What Jorginho is best at is when he's in control of the ball. His protection, the way you protect the defense with him is holding possession, which is something that Arsenal do pretty well. It's him kind of those repetitive, triangles, the way he picks up the ball from, say, defense or the goalkeeper. It's all about bringing that sort of tempo. I mean, people call it like metronomic, but I've always liked the phrase, regista, right? It's become kind of a hipster phrase, but that regista in Italian means, film, basically film director. And I think it makes a lot of sense for Jorginho at his best. He is, when you go back and watch some of his best performances, you can then see the way he's intricately threaded passes through that. It's maybe like the hockey assist, the pass before the pass. I think he did a lot more of that in his early Chelsea years. But Jorginho at times as well can be a little bit more physical. He can, I'm sure, as you'll show with some of the stats, at times he can be good at intercepting, but he's also someone that is, if there's someone that I'm putting money on to get a yellow card, it's Jorginho, because as you've said, when he does get bypassed, he can be bypassed ridiculously easy at times. And that is one of the problems. Jorginho, his best games for Chelsea came when he had a very, very dynamic and mobile player, one of the best midfielders in world football next to him, which was N'Golo Kante. And even if I'd advise Arsenal fans go and watch some of Chelsea's earlier performances this season, like I think RB Salzburg away was a good demonstration of what Jorginho could do. Again, had legs round him, and Chelsea were playing the ball quite swiftly that night. It's in those games where I'd say kind of flair, nice football games, where, you're knocking the ball around. It isn't that physical. A team really isn't pressing him that high. And you've got control and a lot of territory. That's when Jorginho becomes, I think, a good player to have. And I think Arteta, particularly off the bench, if Arsenal winning a game 2-0, you could see him very much come off the bench and provide a suitable and safe service in possession. The issue has always been for me is the other side of the game, is in Jorginho does not provide for me the protection that I think in the Premier League you seriously need. And over 38 games, Jorginho has been found out consistently. And that doesn't mean he's an awful player, but it's just for what I think you need at this level. Jorginho does have some very serious flaws that on his worst days can be seriously exposed. And unfortunately, for a number of reasons, Chelsea's midfield and lack of N'Golo Kante being fit and not replacing has meant that at times I think Jorginho has been isolated. And that's the one thing you don't want him to be, because against very good opposition, he can be found out. But there's no denying you will find performances even this season where they haven't been as consistent, where he can be very, very solid in possession. And that's always what you're going to get with Jorginho, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what Arsenal might need in the next 6 months, because as they go towards trying to win a title, you're going to need that experience. You're going to need professional performances in tough moments. If Partey is injured, there is an argument. I was very much on the round of saying, Caicedo would have been great. Ibrahim Abamba was a potential alternative, who's an exciting young player as well. But if you're in a game, that's the make or break for your title chances, there is a really strong argument that being able to call upon someone who's been there, done it, is in his, is yes, towards the end of his prime, if not already moving out of his prime years, that is a much better thing to lean on than a 20-year-old, is. And I think there's a really good argument for that as well. We're just seeing on the screen there positionally, he is obviously a defensive midfielder, but he does progress into the other half. You see the heat map enough there, the bottom being your own defensive third, the top being the offensive third. Is he someone that can, of course, link up with the attacking play? Because I saw a tweet from, I think it was Henry Winter, that said that his passing was quite, what was the word he used? I didn't use the word safe, but it was something along uninspiring, he might have said, is his passing. Yeah. I mean, so tell me about that.
Yeah, very rarely. I mean, you can pick out certain clips, but they are quite, his Cesc Fabregas-esque passes are quite distant. There was one in the 1920 season to Tammy Abraham that you may have seen floating around today. There was an amazing one for a Kai Havertz winner against Newcastle last year, but those passes are not that consistent. He is someone that, as I say, is going to retain possession. Like, that is his bread and butter. That is his kind of main service. And that's what makes him, I think, at times an important player for a team who wants to crave possession, but can be detrimental to a team who needs to, I think, turn up the gears and find that ball that is going to unlock a defense. You're very unlikely to get that from Jorginho 9 times out of 10. 9 times out of 10, that he's not going to provide that pass for you, unfortunately. And, I look at these sort of heat maps. I think that Jorginho, the reason he had the best run of his Chelsea career was under Tuchel in those first few months of Tuchel, was because he was protected, because there was 3 defenders behind him. You had Reece James and Ben Chilwell either side of him. He had N'Golo Kante next to him. So in a lot of ways, Chelsea were protecting him. And I think that is the big question for Arteta. Say, if you don't have Thomas Partey for a big game, and Arsenal have to go out there and be a bit more progressive, which is what Arsenal are. They like to press up the pitch. They like to be dominant. They like to go after teams, particularly in the first 20 minutes. They try and suffocate teams in their own half. The problem is when that ball turns over, which is what Thomas Partey, a lot of reasons why Arsenal have been good at keeping hold of that pressure. But if that ball turns over and suddenly there's a team breaking on you, that has always been the problem with Jorginho when he has to defend in larger spaces. When he was asked to defend in smaller spaces, I think under Thomas Tuchel, you got that. But the problem is, I think Arteta has built a very progressive, productive system that's got you top of the league. Why would you move away from that other than in extreme situations? So I'd say, in a double six, I'd say it's probably in a Premier League context, I'd say it's probably his best role. Naturally, a lot of people will say 4-3-3. He plays at the base of midfield with 2 8s in front of him, but at times that has caught him out, particularly in the Premier League, compared to, say, when you look back at his time at Napoli.
Yeah, I agree. It's also important, obviously, we're going to look at some of his stats in a minute, but the importance of looking at a player like Jorginho and how he fits into an Arsenal team is going to be different to how he's played for Chelsea, because they are different systems, different styles, and obviously how he might adapt to this Arsenal team under Arteta. Arteta has been a guy that's wanted him for a long time, and actually was linked back to him, I think it was in 2020, with the whole Aouar Partey situation at that time, and Jorginho was suggested as a potential player that Arsenal wanted. And also when Arteta was at Man City, Man City really wanted Jorginho back in 2018 when he was also there. So there's been this constant kind of appreciation of Jorginho for quite some time. Obviously, we're going to look at some of the statistical comparisons. I managed to say the word statistical about 10 times this episode perfectly. Messed it up then. But we are going to look at the statistical comparison between himself, Thomas Partey, Moises Caicedo for obvious reasons, and Amadou Onana, who are the 2 main guys in the Premier League linked to the player. Now, the first thing I wanted to do was I didn't want to put El Neni in this because he's barely played any minutes football this season, so it wasn't really fair to compare those stats-wise, but I think it's a good barometer anyway to see how he compares with these guys. We start off in terms of where he plays. We've just been talking about him positionally. What you do see about that is he plays in that central six role, which means he has influence on both sides of the field. Partey, as you see there, is a lot more central. You see Jorginho kind of popping up also in kind of the wide defensive positions at times, backing up the fullbacks, which obviously is something that Partey doesn't do as often. So that's certainly something that will add to his game. But we've discussed positionally, so let's talk about him defensively. He comes out well here in terms of the number of defensive duels he gets involved in, 7.36 per 90, which is the highest of all the players on this list. And in terms of the success, just over 60%, ever slightly lower than Onana, ever slightly lower than Partey, and a bit higher than Caicedo. They're all kind of very similar in terms of that. But he seems to be quite aggressive when it comes to tackling. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I mean, he's someone that I think has to commit because of his limitations in mobility. He's not someone that is going to get done once and then thinks, well, my speed is going to be able to cover me. So he has to, if he goes in, he has to win the ball, particularly in certain situations. So I think that has always meant that he, as I say, has to be aggressive. And, there are games, as I say, and, I hate to sort of sound, because I'm interested in stats and, I don't want to sound like I'm being sort of all Graham Souness about it. But, I think that there is a case that there is more than meets the eye with these numbers in terms of, if you were to watch Chelsea this season, I don't think, as someone who, like myself, who's watched every Chelsea game this season,
Yeah,
I don't think these stats don't sort of speak to what I've been watching.
Right.
And I think that as I say, there are moments in games that are, I think, critical that probably these stats don't pick up. Now, that isn't to say, as I've consistently said, is that Jorginho will have those moments where he's able to pick up the ball, will have those moments where he's able to drift out and can make some key interceptions. I think the problem has always been when the game becomes a little bit more intense and the width of, in terms of, as I say, him being asked to cover more space. But, there is with Jorginho, there is always I think, a technical side to him that makes him very important. And I think that there are moments where he, I think the game against Liverpool, actually his last game for Chelsea, which is weird to say now, but his final game for Chelsea, you saw that again, what he could provide, not only from a passing point of view, but I do wonder, he's one of these weird players where I sometimes wonder if the level of opposition is higher, he suits it better when,
Right.
if you're playing a more unorthodox team who provide you different type of questions, then, I always felt this weird comparison. I always felt this about Andreas Christensen at Chelsea. I always felt that I'd always felt confident against the likes of Arsenal and Man City that he'd play well because the ball was mostly on the floor. But then when he had to come up against a more physical opposition, he'd struggle. So, as I say, I don't want to completely rubbish these numbers, but,
No, of course.
I don't look at Moises Caicedo, Onana and Partey in the same way as Jorginho. They're just not, what they do on the pitch is very different. And I think is why Chelsea have been trying to go after some of these midfielders in the past.
Yeah, indeed. And I think it was always going to be exceptionally tough for Arsenal to try and secure somebody that could offer you what Partey does in the January transfer window. They tried to get Caicedo, who is categorically not for sale. It doesn't matter what your opinion is of how much Arsenal should have gone in for. It could have gone up to 100 million. And I still think Brighton might have turned around and said, he's not for sale until the summer, because they can probably still get a fee similar to that anyway in the summer, and he can help them towards European football this season. So whilst Dan has absolutely destroyed my statistics, we'll run through a few more. Real Jules wise, he's not the type to really, go up for the challenges like the likes of Partey and Onana are, which show in these stats. He's significantly less than both of those two, both in frequency and in success rate. But he does come out well in interceptions. And I did want to ask you this, even though he's high, as we've just talked about there, the context around stats. Does he, because he obviously is not blessed with loads of pace and he isn't the most mobile of players, does he read the game well to be able to kind of think about where the next pass is going to be played so he can intercept it? And is that reflective in these?
It probably is. I think in sort of general terms, I think that, again, he is a player that has got to this level, I think, by reading the game quite well on the ball and off the ball, obviously. And, to get to a certain level, it's not a fluke that Jorginho, has got to the level he has in his career. as I say, I think that there are times you watch him where when he is on his game and he is spotting those passes and he's able to cut out a pass, and very quickly you've got someone who's then cut out a pass. And as I say, it's always that he's the typical sort of like deep line midfielder that you'd want for someone in possession. He kind of calms things down for you. He'll find the next pass. As I say, it won't always be the pass that's defense splitting. And may annoy some fans at times because he is kind of sideways passing. I mean, interesting that he's coming in under Mikel Arteta, because I think there may be his comparisons to Arteta as a player, particularly in his later years at Arsenal when he played a much deeper role. And kind of that safer passer is going to go left to right effectively. But as you said, interceptions, as I say, there are times and there are absolutely going to be games, probably for Arsenal, when Jorginho is in the right place at the right time. He's intercepting well. And as I say, it's that kind of debate around Jorginho. He's not woeful. He's not awful. And there are, that's always been the bizarre thing when having conversations around Jorginho is the fact that he does at times look like a very, very good midfielder. And got the acclaim last year. And I think it was it FIFA the best or the UEFA Champions League Player of the Year?
He did.
I think these stats kind of represent at times how effective he can be.
Indeed. Let's have a look, go forwards in terms of losses and recoveries as well. He stands out well. He's got more recoveries than any other player on this list, only slightly more than Partey here. He does have a fair amount of losses, but each of the players on here is in the sevens in terms of losses, to be fair to them. Moving into his passing, we have discussed this at length already, so we'll kind of flash by these a bit, but in terms of his accuracy, again, comes out very similar. The range of all these three players is within 2% for pass accuracy, and it is in the high 80s, getting into the 90s for Caicedo as well. Passes into the final thirds, he tries to progress the ball here. We see that with 9.08 passes into the final third, which is up there with Partey, better than that of Caicedo, better than that significantly so of Onana as well. Passes though into the box, this is where Caicedo, as we know, positionally gets a bit more further forward than say Jorginho does. So you see him being more direct with his passing into the box. It's only ever so slightly in terms of per 90, but his accuracy is what's key here. 74% for Caicedo compared to 47 for Jorginho. On the ball, I did want to talk about this a little bit more. As I've mentioned, when you do watch some of the compilations and the clips and the highlights, which I know makes any player look like Messi, but one of the things you do see is that when he's under pressure on the ball, he can get out of those tight spaces. Am I being fooled by compilations, or is that a fair representation of what he's able to do technically?
Yeah, I think I would. I mean, when I think of Jorginho, when I watch him, he's not someone that very regularly is dribbling past people with ease. I think if you're watching short compilations and you're expecting to see that 4 or 5 times a game, I think you're going to be very disappointed. But there absolutely is a case where he's very good at winning fouls, particularly near his own box. He's very good at attracting pressure and just, whatever it is, getting his body in front of the ball. At times it doesn't look like a foul, but he's able to trick the referee to win the foul, and it, relieves the pressure, keeps you in possession, which is good. Again, I can't think of many. Funny enough, one of his worst on the ball mistakes, I think, came against Arsenal. It was the Emile Smith Rowe goal, and I think it was still in lockdown.
The pass back,
but that has been actually a rarity with Jorginho. Like, that is mainly for me not the problem. I think
so. He's not someone who drops like I'm trying to think of an example, like a David Luiz howler. He's not known for these. Or
I mean, I know this could probably be played a few months later by angry Arsenal fans coming at me when he does, which I won't be complaining about. But that's not, as I say, that's not usually the problem with Jorginho. I think that most of the time he's someone that I have trust when he's, I think the fear is always that if he does lose the ball in that situation, you are in trouble. Usually, because he's usually someone who does like to pick up the ball quite deep. So then, if he loses the ball in that situation, then there's a chance that the opposing team is either through on goal or is isolating your back too. But no, I'd say that what you'd see is a player, as I say, that's always that is Jorginho's pitch. He's a conductor. He can be safe in possession. That's what he's always done. So yeah, I wouldn't say that he's regularly doing those sort of clangers. that should make you fearful when he does get a possession. I think there's enough evidence about that now at his age, because there's no third act twist coming with Jorginho. There's no evolution of his career that's going to come now, and we all get surprised. I think what you see is what you get, and I'd only anticipate that as he gets older, you may see those numbers drop, and you may see more mistakes creep into his game. As I say, dependent on what Arsenal see Jorginho as. I think that's the key question
here. And is what they see him as.
Well, that's the thing, right? I think that, I don't know if you want to get to this question like now, but I think that that's what makes this deal a lot better. If you look at him logically, if you just go, okay, he's a replacement for Mohamed El-Neni, well, then it's an upgrade. And for 12 million in the current market, that ain't bad. And for what is it, an 18-month deal?
Yeah, with an option.
It's not the end of the world, is it? I mean, it's so if you look at him like that, I think he provides a serviceable to even better service for that. If you expect him to come in and be a serious upgrade on what you have, and he's going to come into the first team and he's going to offer things that that are going to rival Thomas Partey, then I think you're going to be disappointed. So I think it's understanding what Jorginho is as a player and as a midfielder and what he excels at, which is on the ball, possession, keeping possession, what he doesn't excel at, which is off the ball, which is where he can be found out.
Okay, lovely stuff. No, I appreciate the context. Doesn't tend to score too many goals unless he's given a penalty. And even then, we've seen some moments from Jorginho.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just this on Jorginho's, because I have seen, people talk about his penalty record. I actually did an article that people could find of the evolution of Jorginho's penalties earlier this season on football.london, of kind of how he's changed his run up over the years. Like it's interesting now. He's got to a stage where you're not entirely sure what he's going to do. Is he going to hop and skip? Is he going to kind of do a more conventional run up? Is he going to smash it into the top corner? Is he going to try and roll it past the goalkeeper? He has been one of Chelsea's, in terms of like numbers, he's a really good penalty taker for Chelsea. I mean, I know that people will pick out the bad penalty misses and stuff, but I think considering that responsibility on his shoulders, particularly when Eden Hazard left, he's provided a consistent output of penalties. So I think if you get to a penalty shootout or you need someone to take a penalty, I always back Jorginho to probably do you a good job in that aspect. But no, to expect him to, when he is taking shots, they're not very strong and they're usually inaccurate. Again, he isn't going to get that far forward, and very rarely, I think, trying to think of any goals he scored in open play for Chelsea.
Against Arsenal, mate.
Yeah, there we go. We have to thank Bernd Leno for that one.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, as I say, it's very, very rare because he doesn't, and as again, profile of midfielder, he doesn't get that far up the pitch to provide that, and that's not really has been his role at Chelsea.
So let's get to the verdict, and then we're going to get to questions as well, chat box. So we should have time to take a few before we wrap up. I don't want to take up too much of Dan's time. So verdict: £10 million rising to 12 with add-ons, 18-month contract. The move is designed to be a replacement in the short term for Mohamed El-Neni's injury. What do you make of it?
I mean, I think it's a good deal from Chelsea. I think getting money for Jorginho before his contract runs out is just a no-brainer at this point. Mm-hmm. I would have cashed in on him, as I've already said, in 2021, when I think Chelsea could have got about 60 million for him, but that's not been the way it's worked out. And I think for Chelsea, it's a signal of revamping the midfield. I think it's one of those deals where I think for both parties, they can be happy at this, right? I think that they can, for Arsenal, it gives them the player they've wanted. Okay, it's not the perfect player. It is a bit of a compromise. I do think going from Moises Caicedo to Jorginho is quite a weird turn, if I'm being honest. Like, I think that, I don't mean to start beefing, but I think if Chelsea would have done that, I think people would have been going, what's the plan? There's no plan in terms of profiling. But then when you throw in the context that Jorginho isn't the signing that Caicedo would have been, he isn't going to be an instant first team, or at least I don't suspect he will be, or he's not coming in to be a star man. He's not your future. You're hoping that, as I say, he's going to offer you for the rest of this season and maybe into next season a little bit of experience when you need it. The Europa League is kicking back into gear soon, so you're going to need rotational options for that. So in that sense, and I think that's where Jorginho could thrive, actually, because he's always been better for me in European competition for Chelsea. I think that style of play just suits his game a lot better, and he isn't asked the same questions. So, yeah, I think for the money, for what Chelsea need, for what Arsenal probably need, I think it's a good deal all around.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a very honest comment, to be honest. No, I don't think you're beefing at all. And I think because obviously there's a lot of questions in the Arsenal fan base about why. I have my understanding as to why they've done this. You know, I think what this deal does is it enables Arsenal to still go for that transformative midfielder in the summer. It means that you're not spending upwards of 40, 50 million pounds on a player that you don't necessarily want as the priority. When, say, Arsenal are pushing heavily for Declan Rice in the summer, the interest in Moises Caicedo won't decrease. You know, Arsenal will be there probably with Chelsea trying to battle it out for the player in the summer. So, you know, that this is a deal that replaces El Neni. El Neni's probably going to be off in the summer. Lokonga's going to probably be off in the summer. There's definitely scope for Arsenal still to add 2 quality midfielders. And there just isn't the options, you know, at the moment. You know, we talk about Ibrahim Abamba. Again, I think I like the guy a lot. And, you know, I really was open to seeing him join Arsenal. But if, as I said before, we were playing Man City tomorrow and Partey's not there, would I rather Bamba or Jorginho? I think I'd rather Arsenal have the experience head of Jorginho in that game. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm going to see if I can sift through the comments in the chat box for some genuine questions. Clock Orange says, Tom, you do not like the word backup. Why now accept it just for a backup player? I think I just maybe answered that prior to actually putting up on the screen, because I don't see there being a competitive option there for us right now. Do you see that? Am I being naive? Am I being short about this? Is there because Arsenal aren't going to do what you're doing and pay 120 million euros for Enzo Fernandez? You know what I mean? So what do you think?
Well, yeah, it's also, I think, where both clubs are currently at the moment. You know, Arsenal are, competing for a Premier League title. This is the best opportunity Arsenal have had to win a league title in, I mean, what, since 08, maybe?
Yeah.
So
sorry.
well, I say 08 because you were top for some reason. I remember 08 because there was like a Birmingham game, and
it's difficult for me to look back at years in which we've because some people will say 2016 as well because we finished second and when Leicester won the league.
Okay, 04 or 05, right? That was when, even 05, Chelsea, Arsenal.
Sure, I'll allow it. Oh wait.
Okay. So anyway, getting back to the point, I think that it's for what Arsenal need, right? And Arsenal don't do a lot of these deals, and Arsenal's transfer strategy has been pretty consistent. And as you say, you're not paying 20 million. I guess the only question I'd ask is Georgie, and I can understand where Arsenal fans' fear will come with this is when they look at Willian, when they look at David Luiz, when they look at Petr Cech, you're bringing in players who have already won quite a bit. And, where is that motivation? And I think that's where a lot of Arsenal success has come under Mikel Arteta is replacing those type of players and bringing in young, hungry ones. That's, I think, what Chelsea are trying to do now. They're trying to bring in players who haven't won yet to try and build that generation and culture of players who are hungry to succeed on a big stage. But I've always felt that Jorginho is for his limitations on the pitch, I think he's a good professional. You've always heard good things about him as a professional, that he's very popular inside the dressing room. And apparently Arsenal players have, to this news, or the squad has responded well to this news. So I think for him, he'll be a likable figure. It's just how much value can you extract in that contract time? And if he's just a passable option and he does a job for a bit of time, then that's probably okay, right? It could go much worse. It could add another, blot onto buying Chelsea players. I guess that it's not the most encouraging deal, right? It's not a progressive young midfielder who you could see being at the club for 4 to 5 years. And that is the way Arsenal and the Arteta projects has kind of been selling things, right? It's all about the future. It's all about bringing in these young players. But there's no denying that Jorginho is an experienced player and he's won things in his career. So you need backup, right? You need those players in your squad. It's a demanding game, and Arsenal are going to have a lot of demanding fixtures in the upcoming months if they want to win the Premier League title.
Yeah, I mean, Jorginho started 15 of Chelsea's games this season, I think, so far. Of course,
he's a very durable player. That's the one thing I'd say about him. I mean,
he doesn't get injured, does he? I mean, we touch wood, no, but he doesn't get injured.
Yeah, I mean, whether he goes to Arsenal and for all the injury problems Chelsea have had, Partey, I know Partey's had some injury problems as well.
Never had them before.
He's Jorginho is that's the one thing about him that and we know up to this point is if you look at his injury record, it's pretty good from a Chelsea point of view. We've been able to keep him fit, and that's why he's remained a consistent starting figure, because you can trust his availability over the course of a season.
Indeed. Matt says, is this not the type of signing that Edu spoke against last year? In regards to what he's asking about the comments, I actually print screened these earlier because they popped on my timeline. When the player is 26 plus, big salary, and he's not performing, he's killing you. You don't have a valuation to sell the player. The player is comfortable. Arsenal, London, beautiful. Everything is fantastic. And a good salary. How many players with that kind of characteristics did we have in the past? 80% of the squad, he says. You have to avoid one more year with the problem in the dressing room. Take it out. Even, I'm sorry, if you have to pay for a player to leave because the guy is sometimes also blocking someone. So I disagree with Matt in terms of what he says there about, is this against? Because actually, ironically, it's the opposite. As we just talked about there, he's professional. He's not a problem in the dressing room. If anything, he's going to be an asset in the dressing room in these 6 months as Arsenal try and push towards a striker. He's not blocking anything because he replaces El Neni, and that means there's still space in the squad for Arsenal to add in the summer. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about sort of percentages is that was, I assume Edu was referring to the problem that you had, say, under Emery and probably under Wenger, right? You had Ozil, you had Sanchez was a good player, but you've had Aubameyang. You had players. You go through a lot of the names that they've been able to sell over the past few years, right? That's the problem. It's the imbalance in the squad of having those players. I think what Edu maybe means there is he's saying that the problem, if that is the majority of your players, is that if that is who is dominating your starting 11 and your squad on a consistent basis, that's where you get a cultural problem. If Jorginho is not, I mean, I don't think he's that powerful presence that he's going to alter things that dramatically. So listen, I think it's fair to be concerned and to say we don't want to have that mentality here, because that's what got us into a lot of problems before. But I don't think one player on an 18-month deal is going to completely jeopardize that.
No, I think that's completely fair. And we sit in a situation now where, as I say, we've lost an experienced head in the dressing room in El Neni, who was a big part of the club. Really rate El Neni. The players love El Neni as well. He is going to be missed in that group. And that's why, from my understanding, the club were looking at potentially even activating the 1-year extension in El Neni's contract. But that might now significantly change with the combination of his injury issues and, of course, Jorginho's arrival. So let's see what happens. There is going to be at 9 o'clock tonight a phone-in show for you guys to tune in for. Calling it phone-in therapy this time, because I think a lot of Arsenal fans are potentially in need of that. So that's going to be 9 p.m. UK time. So do make sure you tune in for that. We'll really appreciate you guys being able to do that for us. Of course, I'd like to hear from people that are ideally against the deal, because it generates more discussion, because I can see the good points to it. Of course, there's always openness to hear the opposite point of view as well, and people agreeing with me. What more can you want in life than being agreeing with you? But if you are against the deal, that's who I really would love to hear from, because I think it generates the best discussion possible. So if you are keen on voicing your concerns, your criticisms, or just getting some stuff off your chest, we're going to be doing a phone-in show at 9 p.m. UK time tonight on Deadline Day. Dan, thank you so much for your time and your expertise and your insight as well. Tell people where they can find you, my friend.
Yeah, if you are interested in some Chelsea chat, which will involve probably Jorginho a little bit later today, regarding all of that, is at Son of Chelsea, Son of Chelsea on YouTube, Son of Chelsea on Twitter, Son of Chelsea on TikTok. That is the best place to find me.
Lovely stuff indeed. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Do drop a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you are indeed new around here, with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. As I say, we'll be live at 9 o'clock tonight, talking to supporters who are disgruntled about the signing of Jorginho, and perhaps some as well. I'm sure many more, it turns out to be. They're actually quite happy with it, because it's just the way that things go. So I'll see you then. Have a great evening. Enjoy yourselves. And as always, up the Arsenal.